This video is all about the myth of holding your gear retraction. Okay, when do you wait? So if you like to indulge your geeky side, I think you're going to find this interesting. So stick with me on FlyWire. Hi, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire, I want to talk to you about the results of my landing gear retraction tests that I did in conjunction with the VYV cruise climb and then the engine out. So this is like the third in that flight test video series. There are a lot of folks out there that hold their retraction of the gear until there isn't any runway left under the nose, or some variation of that kind of plan. In 12-volt Bonanzas, it takes about 14 seconds to lower or raise the gear. 28-volt airplanes, it's about 4 seconds. Same gear, just different speed. My A36 was a 28-volt airplane when I originally did this test, and I couldn't find any significant impact. 4 seconds is just so fast that it just really doesn't do anything. The 12-volt airplane takes quite a bit longer, and with the G3X system in this F-33C, I can log 1 second data, and that allows me, or at least I thought it was going to allow me to reach inside the 3 phases of the landing gear operation. Extending or retracting is pretty much the same profile. So 14 seconds is a pretty long time to have gear doors and gear moving around under the wing. So let's take a quick look at the cycle. For the Bonanza and Baron airplanes, the nose gear operation is simple. The gear doors are already open, and the nose gear just starts moving rearward and up into the gear well. And the doors close, boop, that's it. For the main gear, though, you have the inner gear doors open, and that takes about 4 seconds. The next phase is the gear starts moving and retracting the wheels, and that gets nearly up, and then the inner door starts to close. This second phase takes about 6 seconds or so, and the last phase takes 4 seconds as well. So overall about 14, normally about 14 seconds range. Beechcraft Bonanza and Baron landing gear operation may be the most misunderstood retractable gear system in GA world. And the vast majority of the fleet is probably misrigged. I've been working on Bonanzas for nearly 30 years, and I follow the ABS, American Bonanza Society landing gear guide, every time I touch the gear. And as hard as I try to do things right, I know there are probably still some issues with my gear. But the inner workings of the gear system is not important to me in this video. That's not an issue. I just mention it because of the time it takes, etc., for a 12-volt airplane and the drag profile that presents. What I want to see is that if I can discover where the drag penalty of operating the gear is and what the best time to operate it would be. So the POH for this Bonanza and pretty much all Beech really says for number 3, this quote, landing gear retract when positive rate of climb is established. I can't speak for the rest of the POHs for all GA airplanes, but when flying bigger, faster airplanes, positive rate is the common point for gear retraction because for a number of things, but one of those is the likelihood of overspeeding the gear if you don't get it coming up right away because you accelerate quickly. I also know a thing or two about drag, and most of the time, maybe this is a drag, I don't know. Most of the time, we think of total drag, but we can really separate that into 2 different sources that then you add together. Lift-induced drag, which starts out as the highest at slow speeds and then falls off as you go faster. Conversely, parasitic drag starts off low at low speeds and then increases as the square of the velocity. This drag is a result of size, form, roughness of the surface, as well as things sticking out into the airstream, like landing gear. The bottom line is that things sticking out into the wind rapidly become the largest drag factors in our aerospace vehicles. For most airplanes, at some point, power will no longer be able to overcome drag. You'll hit the wall, so to speak. Not a real wall, drag wall. If you fly fixed gear airplanes, about the only control or input you can exert over this fact is, because your gear's hanging out in the wind, is by aerodynamically fairing the landing gear, particularly the wheel, to reduce that drag. If you fly retracts, when you raise the gear or lower it is the huge factor. Spoiler alert, if you're starting to think that my flight test results are going to confirm what I just said about parasitic drag and initiating gear retraction at positive rate, well, you're right. And if you're if that maxes your attention span and it's all you need to know, well, go ahead and watch the latest cat video. But don't forget to hit the like button on the way out. And if you're still here, then you want to get to a little deeper knowledge, and that's fine. And that's why I did this video, because I wanted to know, and I want to share it with you. So I think you're going to find it worthwhile if you stick around for just a little bit longer. I think the drag profile I found in my testing would apply to any GA retractable gear airplane. The actual drag totals and peaks would vary by the design of your airplane. In other words, the drag impact may be more or may be less than I found for this Bonanza. So the gear operates differently in a Cessna than it does in the Bonanza. The wheels never change their profile to the wind, and a Cessna actually goes flat plate in the high wing ones. I did this test using VY and cruise climb as my target speeds for the climb. The actual takeoff technique was the same in all test points. Notably, I manipulated pitch in order to maintain speed, and you're going to see that in the charts that we're going to show in here in a second. The first look was at VY and V cruise climb, initiating the gear at 100 feet, and the second was initiating gear retraction at positive rate. So it's going to happen a lot quicker at a slower overall speed. I was looking for vertical speed during the climb as well as the gear retraction segment, the pitch attitude, and most importantly, the time to climb from brake release to 1,100 feet AGL. My theory is that the time to climb would show the impact of parasitic drag increase from delaying the gear, and I only delayed it to 100 feet. Plenty of folks actually, with their gear hanging as they head off into the sunset. They pass the end of the runway much further, and then they put the gear up. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot the gear. Well, it just doesn't accelerate very well with the gear hanging, does it? So there's a trade-off from when you're going to put your gear up, even if you're going to hold on to it. Okay, here are the results of the test. Let's look at the charts for VY retracting the gear at 100 feet, and the VS during retraction, and then the subsequent VS vertical speed in the climb to our selected altitude. Then after that, I'll look at the vertical speed and pitch attitude for the all four cases, the cruise climb as well as VY is what I'm saying. And then at the end, I'm going to summarize the results. So here we are, gear retraction, VY at 100 feet. For VY, it really doesn't appear to matter much in the first phase. There's hardly any significant drag, impact and drag situation. And you can see the increase in drag in the second phase, where the main gear is in particular is moving. The third phase, with the inner doors starting to close, you can see the vertical speed and the pitch starting to increase dramatically. Okay, this is the climb profile for VY gear at 100 feet. For most of the climb phase, for the post-climb phase, there seems to be a spring effect in vertical speed after the airplane is clean. And then it levels off to a more normal, constant rate of climb and pitch fairly quickly. So this is the gear retract sequence for cruise climb, gear at 100 feet. The result is a little more significant in the first phase, and in the second phase, gear loss due to drag, energy loss due to drag was more pronounced. Pitch angles were, in general, about 1 and 1.5 degrees less than the VY pitch angles. And the third phase started to show the same kind of dramatic increase as the inner doors finished their closing. So the drag is dropping off very quickly. This is the climb profile for cruise climb at 100 feet, at gear at 100 feet. The same spring effect that we observed for VY, and the overall vertical speed was quite a bit lower than for VY, and this is an artifact of the increased speed during the gear retraction from the acceleration to cruise climb, as opposed to VY using that energy for climb. So, and having that reserve energy to take up for the drag. I think this is good evidence of the drag we predicted for the gear retraction operation being in relation to speed. Okay, here's the gear retraction sequence for VY and the gear done at positive rate. You can see within about 1 to 2 seconds of liftoff, and you begin the gear retraction sequence. Therefore, one would expect to see less drag overall, but a larger impact in the short term because of the lower speed at initiation and the climb rate. So in other words, the impact on the climb rate is larger. I think this graph shows just that. The line looks a little saddle-like here with the exception of the spike in the middle. And I looked at that pretty closely, and it was a transient at about 1.5 degrees in pitch for 1 second. And I think that's got to have been me being a spaz for some reason. Okay, maybe all the time. So this is climb for VY, the climb profile for VY at positive rate, gear positive rate. The spring effect is seen again, so very interesting how that's happening. It is clear that the climb rate and pitch angle are both much higher for VY, hit 13 degrees for the climb angle. This is the gear retraction sequence for cruise climb and gear at positive rate, and the pitch angle deltas for cruise climb and profile, the cruise climb profile, definitely show up here. Pitch angles are a little over 50% less, or 50% of what VUI pitch angles were. Biasing for speed is a penalty. The vertical speed also shows the effect of additional parasitic drag. Essentially, you were flat during the second phase of gear retraction, the most drag situation. In phase 3, the vertical speed and pitch start to increase dramatically again. So the drag falls off very quickly. This is the climb profile for cruise climb positive rate gear. The spring effect is here again. And it also springs up to very nearly approaching what the vertical speed of VY is at a similar point in time. The gap to VY narrowed for a bit to within 250 feet per minute, actually. And the leveling happens as well. So it's kind of a normal profile for any speed that we're going to target. So let's look at the overall table now. These numbers have been averaged across the data points for gear retraction period and for the climb. They don't show the impact of these phases of the energy state, so they're not going to show us what we just saw in the charts. Frankly, I was excited to see all of this here, all that basically of getting inside the cycle period, the gear cycle period. If we look at vertical speed alone, clearly VY is the winner, especially with a gear retraction occurring at 100 feet. With time to accelerate and establish a climb rate, VY was consistent. Pretty high deck angle as well, 13 degrees as I said. But part of that is due to the IO 550 in my airplane, this caveat, as opposed to the original IO 520. In other words, your actual mileage may vary, but the effect would be proportional in your airplane, in my opinion. So I think it applies, not just this bonanza. You can see that the sacrifice to accelerate instead of climb can be easily seen in these test results. But and this is a big but in my opinion, the net effect of the increase of speed is achieved by holding the gear retraction until later in the profile, even 9 to 10 seconds later, can only be told by comparing the time to climb. Okay, so here we can see that the time to climb for both VY and cruise climb, holding the gear until 100 feet, is 48 seconds, amazingly. The two profiles even out because, frankly, VY is a little bit peaky, and it's kind of the turtle in the hare situation, and cruise climb catches up. Using that as a baseline, the positive rate technique has VY leveling off at 41 seconds. That's 7 seconds, or 15% better than holding the gear until 100 feet. For cruise climb, level off occurred 3 seconds more, so at 44 seconds, for an improvement of about 8% over the baseline of holding the gear to 100 feet. So what we have, what are we proving? Essentially that the guy using that dang slide rule figured out the drag curves. He got it right. The parasitic drag increases with speed. It is better to retract your gear at a positive rate early when your speed is lower rather than holding on to it for some possibility and you're faster, so the drag gets higher. that complicates your situation at a higher speed at a later point. The concept is that you can land on the runway that you just took off from. If you took 2,000 feet from brake release to the gear retraction point, well, you're probably going to use at least another 2,000 feet or more to get back on the runway, and then do I have enough before I run off the end? How much is available? If it's 11,000, 10,000, 11,000 feet, yeah, no big deal. But if it's not, I think it's not the plan. Well, we're talking about an engine failure after takeoff scenario. I mean, frankly, everything I do from my perspective is, in this whole profile is I'm going to think about an engine failure on after takeoff. I'm not worried about the gear or the airplane being reusable after landing. What I'm worried about is being able to walk away from the wreck, or maybe run if I need to, for that matter. To do that, I prefer having the energy, and that equates to speed. Speed is life. The gear is nothing but drag, and since the drag gets worse the faster you go, then I want to get it up as quickly as I can. And the last thing I'm worried about is putting the gear down in a forced landing situation. I've done a video that shows that there's really very little damage to an airplane, particularly a Bonanza, if you land gear up on pavement. Realize that in all the engine failure after takeoff experiments I've done, you generally lose 30 knots when the failure happens. Using VY to climb to altitude, as I did in the test for today, will get you there either at the same time or 7% quicker than cruise climb. But you're going to be right at stall speed if you had an engine failure. Using cruise climb, then you're going to have a little bit of energy to burn here in that startle phase, and you'll have a healthier margin away from the stall and for maneuvering to land. And that's my personal choice. I like options. But hey, that's just me. You make your choice, but do it intentionally. Just don't do it by, well, somebody told me and this is the way I've always done it or something like that. Do it intentionally. If you like the video, hit like and subscribe. It looks like a bit like this here. And I'd like to thank my Patreon supporters here as well. And if you'd like to support the channel, I'll leave a link below in the description. I appreciate it. Well, that's make your choice. How are you gonna fly? When are you gonna retract your gear? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on FlyWire.